Good morning to you and welcome to Penn Vicarage. Hope you are well and cheerful on this Wednesday morning. Well, I would normally be playing golf this morning. Two reasons I can't. Course is shut, but also because if I was to play this morning, I'd probably get washed away anyway with all this rain. So it's going to be a lovely day with God at home today. But I hope whatever you have planned for today, I hope it's good. I hope you know God with you in a very special way today too. Well, 1 Corinthians, we are working our way through. And the question, I suppose you might say, of this morning's reading is, to marry or not to marry? That is the question. So, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, picking it up at verse 25. Now concerning virgins, I have no command of the Lord, but I give my opinion as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. I think that, in view of the impending crisis, it's well for you to remain as you are. Are you bound to a wife? Do not seek to be free. Are you free from a wife? Do not seek a wife. But if you marry, you do not sin. And if a virgin marries, she does not sin. Yet those who marry will experience distress in this life, and I would spare you that. I mean, brothers and sisters, the appointed time has grown short. From now on, let those who have wives be as though they had none, and those who mourn as though they were not mourning, and those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing, and those who buy as though they had no possessions, and those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world is passing away. I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the affairs of the Lord, how to please the Lord. But the married man is anxious about the affairs of the world, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried woman and the virgin are anxious about the affairs of the Lord, so they may be holy in body and spirit. But the married woman is anxious about the affairs of the world, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to put any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and unhindered devotion to the Lord. If anyone thinks he's not behaving properly towards his fiancée, if his passions are strong, and so it has to be, let him marry as he wishes. It's no sin. Let them marry. But if someone stands firm in his resolve, being under no necessity, but having in his own desire under control, has determined in his own mind to keep her as his fiancée, he will do well. So then, he who marries his fiancée does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do better. A wife is bound as long as her husband lives. But if the husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, only in the Lord. But in my judgment, she is more blessed if she remains as she is. And I think that I too have the Spirit of God. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, to marry or not to marry, that is the question. The Corinthians had clearly written to Paul asking what to do about marriage, because they clearly got people who were unmarried. Should they marry? Shouldn't they? Whatever. What about people who've been widowed and so on? And these are kind of questions that come up in church life. And they'd ask Paul the answer. Now you have to understand the context. There were two great pressures in society at the time. Most of society, what they call Greco-Roman society, considered marriage to be the higher duty. And there's a huge pressure on people to be married. On the other hand, there were people living in the desert, what's called the Essene community, and people like that. The kind of people who are at the Dead Sea Scrolls. For them, celibacy was the thing. And so most of society was telling you, you should be married, that's the way to go. But also some very religious people said celibacy was the way to go. And the people clearly pulled in two directions. What should they do? And they write to Paul, to marry or not to marry, that is the question. And Paul basically says, it's right for different people. What's right for one is right, and what's right for another is somebody else. But he does give us three principles, which I think are actually quite important, and we can all learn from these this morning. Principle number one is, I keep saying, Jesus is the answer. What for you helps you put God first? That is the question. Principle number one is, what is it for you and I that gives us what he calls unhindered devotion to the Lord? What helps us put God first? And putting God first, that is principle number one. So find for you what puts God first. And what Paul says here for him is that for him, with his particular life, being a missionary and so on, and in his particular situation, he has found that by being singles and traveling around the way he did and so on, you can kind of imagine it would be right. For him, he has found he's most able to have unhindered devotion to the Lord by being unmarried. That's principle number one is, what for you and I helps us put God first. That's principle number one. Jesus is Lord. Principle number two is, what gives you peace? But at the end of the day, if a person is not at peace, it's more difficult for them to have unhindered devotion to the Lord anyway. So what Paul is saying is that for him, he has found by being unmarried, he's able to have more time for God and so on. But he says, if a person meets somebody and is desperately in love with them and spends what's supposed to the rest of the time with them, for them, it's better that they marry and are happy in their marriage and find peace in their marriage than spending all their life being lonely or what he calls burning with passion or whatever. It's much better for them if they get married because they're much more likely to be at peace that way. And if they're at peace, they're much more likely to have unhindered devotion to God anyway. So principle number 1 is putting God first. Principle number 2 is what for each individual person gives them most peace, because by having peace in their life, they're much more likely to have unhindered devotion to God and not spending all the time wishing that they were somebody else or with somebody else, if you see what I mean. So principle number 1 is put God first. Principle number 2 is find peace, what works best for you, because by having peace, you will have better devotion to God anyway. Principle number 3 is, if you're going to be married properly. It's absolutely right that married people have good marriages. It's absolutely right that husbands should look after their wives. And it's absolutely right that wives should look after their husbands. It's absolutely right that they look after the affairs of each other. If you're going to be married, do it properly. And it carries with it love and joys, but it also carries with it responsibilities. You know, if you're going to be a husband, be a good husband. If you're going to be a wife, be a good wife. And if you're going to be a parent, be a good parent. Look after people properly. So it carries with it great joy, but it carries with responsibilities too. But I think there's this business actually about the crisis to come. And I think this is something I have to understand about the particular context at the time. There's some thought that Paul thought that Jesus Christ was going to come back soon. There's some thought. There's another thought actually that there may have been a crisis to come. That there's maybe some famine which either arrived or was coming very, very soon. An event of major crises like a famine or like maybe the second coming of Christ or whatever, then actually having a family could cause an awful lot of heartache. It could cause an awful lot of pain because you care about the people you're looking after, and seeing them not having enough to eat or whatever can cause an awful lot of heartache. And what Paul says here is, in view of the crisis to come, I kind of like to spare you that because of the heartache that might come around the corner. So there's 3 principles here. Firstly, and it's all sorts of life really, put God first in our lives. God has to be number 1. And it's about having what he calls unhindered devotion to God. That's principle 1. Principle number 2 is, to marry or not to marry, find whatever gives you most peace, because whatever gives you the most peace is the position you're most likely to be able to serve God in peace and have unhindered devotion to God and not spend all one's time wishing one was somebody else or with somebody else, if you see what I mean. Principle number 3 is, if you're going to be married, that's brilliant, but do it well. If you're going to be a husband, be a good husband. If you're going to be a wife, be a good wife. If you're going to be a parent, be a good parent. It carries with it love, it carries with it joy, but it also carries with it heartache as well. But absolutely right, because that's what love is all about. Love means you care. So be a good husband, be a good wife, be a good parent, be a good single person. Whatever you're going to do it well, do it for God, and do it in God. So God comes first. By being at peace, you're most likely to serve God anyway. And also, whatever you're calling in life, be it married, unmarried, parent, whatever, not parent, whatever it's going to be, do it well and do it for God. Read the passage again, have a look and see what you think. That's my take on it. God bless you. Have a lovely day.